This is Beehive Banter. In a week of the House not sitting low, plenty of political press releases, Reserve Bank warnings and calls for all those excessive big business profits to go into the government tax coffers. And who would argue? Well, there is someone. The House might not be sitting, but he is NBR's political editor, Brent Edwards, sitting there. Well, lots of figures out this week, including the unemployment rate of 3.3%. Pretty much static, despite predictions. And I laugh because the pundits are always so right. Despite predictions, yes, of a lower figure, which now, of course, is no good for the economy, is it, Brent?
Well, I mean, people are going to look at it, and we've had economists saying this for some time, that unemployment needs to be higher if you're going to bring inflation down. Got the Reserve Bank saying that the employment at the moment is above what it would consider,
good,
full sustainable employment. Well, that doesn't put any numbers on it. And it's careful to say that one of the ways you deal with it is if you end up getting more people coming into the country through immigration, then you expand the labour market, that might be the answer to it, rather than saying, oh, we need lots of people to be laid off.
Yeah, but there's only one way to expand the labour market, and that's by bringing people in. But I'll get to that in a second. Now, here we go, because we need higher unemployment from the bank, and here's the good and bad bit. Wage rises, though, a 33-year high, with hourly average wage increases of 7.4%. Now, that's outpaced inflation at 7.2%. And in the words of John Campbell, Brent, all sounds marvellous, but it ain't, is it?
Well, it is good, actually, in one level. I mean, it shows that people's wages in general are keeping pace with inflation, but of course not everyone's getting that 7.4%. I don't think I noticed it in my pay packet grant, and probably not in yours, but it is good, and the unemployment figure is good too. But but in the current situation with high inflation, you're going to think the Reserve Bank in a couple of weeks puts out its November monetary policy statement. It'll be looking at some of those numbers and then thinking, right, we still need to have to keep on raising interest rates. So while people's incomes might be going up, those with mortgages are seeing their interest rates continue to climb.
Well, and also too, and we mentioned this before about tax creep, because of course the government's tax take is much higher, and that's because people are getting more wages, they're moving into the next level, they end up with less money in their hand. The higher costs, of course, this all contributes to those higher costs. So, A, can the government do anything about it? And B, the Reserve Bank, it's going to keep putting stuff up and up and up until what?
Well, I mean, the government can't do anything about constraining wage increases like that. I mean, unless you're wanting to suggest...
Well, they've just given bus drivers a big pay increase, haven't they? So they can do something. They decided to give them a big pay increase. I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but they did it.
But I thought you were talking wage increases were too high, and you were asking...
I'm not saying they're too high. I'm just saying what's happened.
Yeah. But you asked, what can the government do about it? Not much about that.
No, but they're fueling it.
They're fueling it by increasing the pay of those on low incomes, where there are real labour shortages, and a large part of the reason there are real labour shortages is because those people don't get paid enough.
Yeah, but I heard a figure that we're 150,000 people short in this country right now of jobs, and you can say, well, there's a lot of people on the unemployment, but they aren't applying for any jobs.
Yeah. I mean, and that's certainly what employers are obviously struggling to find staff, and that comes back to the issue you raised about immigration need to, but actually just listening this week to the Reserve Bank Governor Adrian Orr on the financial stability report, the reality is there's a labour shortage worldwide. All sorts of countries are struggling to get people in.
And they're more attractive than we are because of our settings.
Well, yeah, that might be the case, but I mean...
it is the case.
Well, but there's an international competition for it, and it's not going...
And we're not winning it.
And it's not going to ease anytime soon, even no matter really what probably the government does.
No, that's why perhaps a new government might change those rules. The Reserve Bank also released the Financial Stability Report, which basically, Brent said, and let's be honest, this came as an absolute shocker to everyone when the Reserve Bank turned around and said that these words, dark clouds are looming.
Yeah, but let's also look on the bright side. It also said that the financial system's really resilient, the banks are in great shape, and in fact the economy itself is also in pretty good shape to absorb a lot of these shocks.
Who are these people that are in a good shape?
Well, unemployment's only 3.3% for a start, so we've got a lot more people in work. And in those stats, employment went up as well. The underutilisation rate, that went down. All the numbers actually were pretty positive.
But the finance minister's saying that, yes, more people are now earning money, so it'll help them get through the crap.
Well, if they are earning more money, it will help in some way cover extra costs. There's no doubt about that. But so what what they're saying is the economy is in relatively good shape to absorb these shocks. I mean, Adrian Orr made the point that if you look around the world, actually, the New Zealand economy is probably in better shape than most other countries.
I want to go to Iran now. Now, we're allowed to talk about that country. Well, we've always been allowed to. However, it seems we, or the PM, if you like, was holding back after a rich lister's son and girlfriend decided to go joyriding in the country in order to get more social media followers because, Brent, they are known as influencers, younger versions of you, Brent.
I know, they had a lot of influence in Iran.
Yeah. However, since we did whatever we did in order to ensure their release or escape or being escorted out of the country, whatever it was, now that they're finally free, the gloves are off. And the PM now is taking a stand against what's been going on there lately. The PM says there was no deal. Commentators say, well, there was a deal. So was there? Was there no deal? What happens now? And why do we care?
Well, I mean, the PM's quite clear there's been no deal from the government, that it was, and I've repeated this, it was just from negotiation and the work of New Zealand diplomats in securing.
So let me just say, no, hang on. So the negotiation goes, well, we're not going to give you anything. No, we're not going to do anything, but just release them. Oh, okay.
Well, I wasn't involved in the negotiation, so I don't know how they went. But the reality was, before they were released, the New Zealand government did express its opposition to the way Iran was behaving and the way it was conducting certificates. But what the Prime Minister has said, she's acknowledged that while those two people were still in Iran, there was a balancing act going on between condemning Iran's actions while at the same time trying to negotiate their release. Now they're out. It's kind of removed the shackles that the government might have felt it was under, so it can take further steps to show how much it disapproves and opposes the way the Iranian regime is acting against women in that country.
Have we learned anything?
Learned anything in what way?
Well, diplomatic relations for a start, and perhaps also too, if people like this go in there who are obviously well off and they cause a ruckus like this, should they not have some sort of financial penalty, some are saying?
Well, kind of morally, you might think that there should be an obligation on that couple to think, oh, well, we should front up with a bit of dosh. But I mean, no government can start imposing costs on it. I mean, governments are responsible for trying to help out their citizens, whatever
no matter
trouble
how stupid they may be.
No matter how stupid they are, and no matter what trouble they find themselves in overseas countries. And so I think that the New Zealand government did do that here. We do have actually a relatively rich history of diplomacy in Iran. And I mean, one of the things that might have helped us is that we're a small country, I guess. And we've
influential country.
And we've had that relationship. I mean, I think New Zealand diplomats, if I remember rightly, in the end were involved in the American hostage situation going back to the very start of this Iranian regime.
All right, well, most of us, as we've been talking about, have been struggling with prices and costs. Well, when I say most of us, I mean, I don't mean power companies or banks who are making huge profits. Now, Julianne Genter has called for a windfall tax. And Brent, I bet there's a lot of support for this when our mortgages are higher, but the banks are making over $10 billion in profit. Money, of course, most of that going offshore. Now, this will be one of the very few taxes, I think, that most people would clap their hands with glee if implemented.
Yeah, I mean, well, I don't know that everyone has. I mean, certainly the opposition parties have come out against it, I think. And
why?
Well, I think they're seeing it as some sort of envy tax, and, that's not the way to go.
Envy of who?
And I think also, interestingly, Adrian Orr, just made the remark, one of the reasons that, the banks are in great shape and the financial system's in great shape is because of the profits they've been making. So, there's...
Well, the banks say they need these profits because of those dark clouds on the horizon I talked about before. That's just spin.
Well, the interesting thing...
$10 billion profit.
The interesting thing will be because both Orr and the Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, have said the banks have to step up and help their customers who are in trouble. So that will be interesting. What response the banks take there. I mean, if they get hard-nosed and start turfing people out of their homes, maybe their social licence to operate will sort of shrink a bit. That's hardly likely to happen, though, because in that sense, they'd only worsen...
Good idea, though.
Yeah, but they'd only worsen the pain for themselves, because if people start being kicked out of their homes because they can't afford the mortgage, that's only going to crash the housing market even more.
No, I mean, a good idea for the banks to actually start looking after.
Oh, start looking after him. Well,
that's like a warning, like the carrot stick thing.
Yeah, well, that's certainly the pressure, and they've come out, I think, through the Banking Association and indicated, yes, they're prepared to talk to their customers. They're going to do whatever they can to help them out.
Because they don't want to be paying a windfall tax.
Yeah. But look, a windfall tax isn't going to happen. It's Green Party sort of policy, although it's a discussion paper at the moment, but it fits with the philosophy they've had for a long time. But I can't see the government...
I might not often agree, but I do in this case, Brent. Looking forward, drum roll please, Labor Party conference this weekend. Woohoo! Last chance to salvage what could be a savaging next year. What can we expect?
Well, I think, for the party, it goes into this conference with most of the kind of events, circumstances running against it, because the economy and high inflation, we talked about this before, high inflation, interest rates continuing to go up.
We're in the car-car, is what you're trying to say.
Next year,
in
the next year, 60% of mortgage holders refixing their mortgages, so they're going to go from something starting with a 2 to something starting with at least
8.
a 7, maybe an 8, and that's going to really be tough for people. And look, the government, and actually Adrian Orr, point to largely international factors in driving much of this. The opposition point to the government's loose fiscal policy and the Reserve Bank's loose monetary policy for driving a lot of this. But irrespective, most people, when they're feeling pain, economic pain, will blame the government of the day. So that's a big, big problem for Labor.
So what are we going to find this weekend? What are they going to do?
Well, I think they'll probably drink a lot.
I thought, is it not banned at their little conferences anymore, or is that just? I read that
well,
somewhere. I don't know.
I think
that could be fake news.
I think they'll be scratching their heads about how, because I think a lot of the Labor activists, they know that there's a lot of stuff outside their control. So they'll be probably talking about, well, what is it? Are there any policies that they can look at over the next 12 months that might help turn things around a bit? Will there be debate around the three waters?
Well, I said they've just given it new funding from the COVID fund.
Interesting. I've seen on social media some Labor people saying they should abandon the three waters. It's unpopular, so it'll be interesting.
Well, that is beyond that for this week. A prediction, though, I do have for next week. Labor will still divert discussion about middle-income tax relief in some form if they are re-elected. They won't talk about it, but I think they'll talk about it in private. They won't talk about it after this weekend. What's your prediction for next week?
For next week?
Yeah.
I don't have any particular. Particular predictions for next week, Grant. All I can say is, there'll probably be looming storm clouds ahead.
Oh, jolly good, Brent. Thank you. Marvellous, Brent. As are you for watching or listening. And as usual, we appreciate it. We'll see you next time.